You're in the wrong place, old man. Whoa, I'm just a janitor. Not anymore. Hey, watch it. This ends now. Take that. Yeah, who's the mop man now?
Filthy scum, come in here and fight me. Sir, I'm just the janitor. Get in. Silas Crow grabbed the back of Rhett's collar and dragged him through the cage door. I need a punching bag. You'll do. Silas laughed. Please spare me. You think you're my opponent? You should just kneel and use that filthy black brain of yours to wipe the floor. I need a punching bag. You'll do. You should feel honored that a filthy old geezer like you was chosen by us. I'll show you the martial arts of a champion. Don't worry, old man, I'll go easy. Wouldn't want to break what's left of you. The cage door clicked shut. What Silas didn't know was who he just locked himself in the cage with. Iron Forge MMA sat on the corner of Peachtree and 10th in Midtown Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows, black mats, a steel cage bolted to the center of the main floor. The walls were covered in framed magazine covers, all featuring the same face. Silas Crow, 34 years old, 6'2", 225 pounds of sculpted muscle, 3 amateur MMA titles, 0 professional fights. But nobody talked about that last part. Silas built his empire on content, not combat. 2 million followers on TikTok, a YouTube channel called Alpha Forge. Every video the same formula. Silas flexing, Silas sparring with students half his skill level, Silas screaming motivation quotes into the camera with his shirt off. He charged $200 a month per student. Iron Forge had over 300 members. The money was real. The fighting record was not. Silas needed one thing to keep the machine running, an audience that believed he was untouchable. And every audience needs someone to look down on. That someone was Rhett Hale, 61 years old, 5'9", 155 pounds on a good day. His hair had gone salt and pepper a decade ago, his back curved slightly forward from years of pushing mops and carrying buckets. He arrived at Iron Forge every morning early, mopped the mats, scrubbed the showers, cleaned the cage, emptied the trash, left by mid-afternoon. Nobody knew his last name. Nobody asked. To Silas and his students, Rhett was furniture. A gray-haired black man in a faded blue uniform who kept his eyes down and his mouth shut. The kind of man people looked through, not at. But Rhett Hale was looking at everything. Every combination Silas taught, every takedown drill, every footwork pattern the guest coaches demonstrated on weekends. Rhett watched from behind his mop. He memorized the angles. He studied the timing. He filed it all away in a mind that had been trained to read fighters since he was 19 years old. Because Rhett Hale had not always been a janitor. Years earlier, he fought under a different name in semi-pro circuits across Georgia and Alabama. 41 fights, 38 wins, 30 knockouts. He retired quietly after his wife died and left him with a 5-year-old daughter to raise alone. No fanfare, no goodbye fight. He just stopped showing up. Within a year, the circuit forgot his name. Within 5, even the promoters couldn't remember his face. Rhett didn't mind. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for rent. And when the fighting stopped, the mopping started. But the hands never forgot. Every night after Iron Forge, Rhett drove east to the East Side Community Center on Boulevard. The building was 40 years old, cracked walls, a leaking roof patched with blue tarp, a basketball court with bent rims. And in the back room, 6 nights a week, Rhett ran a free self-defense class for teenagers from the neighborhood. 12 kids, all black, ages 14 to 19. Most of them had nowhere else to go after dark. Some had records, some had parents who worked 3 jobs, some had no parents at all. Rhett never asked, he just taught. He taught them stance, guard, how to slip a punch, how to control distance, how to breathe when someone bigger was coming at them. He mixed what he knew from boxing with what he stole from watching Silas's gym every morning. Old school meets new school. The kids didn't know where the techniques came from. They just knew Mr. Hale made them sharper every week. 3 of his students had entered the Georgia Regional Youth Combat Tournament last spring. All 3 won their divisions. Nobody outside the neighborhood noticed. But Rhett noticed something else. A sign on the community center door. The city council had approved a rezoning proposal. The building was scheduled for demolition. The new tenant for the land had already been announced. Iron Forge MMA, franchise location number 2. Owner, Silas Crow. The next morning, Rhett arrived at Iron Forge early like always. Mop in hand, head down. He started on the cage mats, working in slow circles the way he'd done 1,000 times before. Silas walked in with 2 students behind him. He didn't look at Rhett. He never did unless he needed content. "Yo, mop man." Silas snapped his fingers without turning around. "You missed a spot by the heavy bags. Do it again." Rhett had not missed a spot. He never missed a spot. But he nodded, picked up his bucket, and walked to the heavy bags. "And take your shoes off. You're tracking dirt on my mats." Rhett looked down at his shoes. They were clean. He took them off anyway. The floor was cold. He kept mopping. Silas's phone was already out. He propped it against a water bottle, angled toward Rhett. The red recording light blinked. "Hey everybody, welcome back to Alpha Forge." Silas grinned at the camera. "Quick life lesson this morning. See this guy?" He pointed at Rhett without looking at him. 61 years old. Been mopping floors since before some of you were born. No skills, no ambition, no future. This is what happens when you settle. Rhett's hand tightened on the mop handle, just for a second. Then it relaxed. "Don't be this guy." Silas turned back to the camera. "Don't be a mop man, be a champion." The video went up that afternoon, tens of thousands of views by dinner. The comments were split. Half laughed, half called it cruel. Silas pinned the top comment. "Hard truth hurts. Stay soft and stay broke." That evening, Rhett parked outside Eastside Community Center and sat in his truck for a long time. The demolition notice was still on the door. Days left. Inside, 12 kids waited for him on the mats. Cade, 19, stood at the front. He'd seen the TikTok. They all had. "Mr. Hale, you saw what he posted." Rhett set his bag down, laced up his training shoes, looked at the group. "Line up, stance drill, 30 rounds. Nobody mentioned the video again, but Cade hit the pads harder that night than he ever had before. The first TikTok was just the beginning. Silas made Rhett a series. He called it Mop Man Mondays. Every week, a new video. Every week, Rhett was the punchline. Week 2, Silas dumped a protein shake on the mat Rhett had just finished cleaning, filmed himself pointing at the mess. "Oops, guess Mop Man's got overtime." The camera panned to Rhett on his knees, wiping it up. Hundreds of thousands of views. Week 3, Silas handed Rhett a broom and told him to sweep the cage while a sparring session was still going. Rhett stepped in between 2 fighters trading combinations. Silas filmed from outside the cage, laughing. "Mop Man's got a death wish today." Even more views. Week 4, Silas walked up to Rhett during lunch. Rhett was eating a sandwich on a bench outside the back door. The only 30 minutes he got to sit down. Silas grabbed the sandwich out of his hand and threw it in the dumpster. "No eating on the premises. New rule." There was no new rule. Rhett looked at the dumpster, looked at Silas, stood up and went back inside to finish his shift. He didn't eat for the rest of the day. Silas posted that one too. Caption: "Discipline starts with knowing your place." Over 400,000 views. Silas's follower count crossed 2.5 million, but the views weren't enough. Silas needed the algorithm to keep feeding him, and the algorithm rewarded escalation. So, Silas escalated. He cut Rhett's hours from 40 to 32. Same workload, less pay. When Rhett asked about it, Silas pulled out a clipboard he'd never used before. "Quality inspection. You failed 3 zones last week. Showers, cage, and the waiting room floor. Policy says I dock hours for repeated failures." There was no quality inspection. There was no policy. There was no clipboard before that morning. Rhett needed every dollar. The community center didn't charge rent for his classes, but he paid for the kids' equipment out of his own pocket. Gloves, wraps, mouth guards. A new heavy bag every few months because the old one split at the seams. Losing 8 hours a week meant choosing between gas for his truck and tape for the kids' hands. He chose the tape. He started walking to work. 3 miles each way. Early morning. Atlanta heat in the summer. Atlanta cold in the winter. 61 years old. Walking along Boulevard in the dark because a 34-year-old millionaire wanted content. Then Silas found out about the community center. It happened by accident. One of Silas's students, a 22-year-old named Felix, trained part-time at Iron Forge and part-time at a boxing gym on the east side. Felix mentioned to another student that he'd seen the old janitor from Iron Forge teaching kids at some run-down community center off Boulevard. The rumor reached Silas by lunch. Silas drove to East Side that afternoon. He parked across the street in his white Range Rover and watched through the window. He saw Rhett on the mats, saw the kids drilling combinations, saw the cracked walls and the leaking ceiling, and the duct-taped heavy bag swinging from a pipe. He filmed 30 seconds and posted it with a laughing emoji. Caption: My janitor thinks he's a coach, teaching kids to fight in a crack house. This is why I'm building Iron Forge 2 right here. Somebody's got to clean this neighborhood up, and I don't mean with a mop. The video hit 600,000 views overnight. Comments poured in. Some defended Rhett, most didn't. Silas's audience was loyal, and they followed his lead. Stick to mopping, old man. Somebody call CPS on that gym. Those kids deserve a real trainer, not a janitor with delusions. Rhett didn't have social media. Cade did. He showed Rhett the video on his phone the next evening before class. Rhett watched it once, handed the phone back, said nothing. Mr. Hale, we got to do something. He's laughing at us. He's laughing at the kids. We are doing something. Rhett pulled on his training gloves. Line up. But 3 kids didn't show that night, and 2 more didn't show the night after. Their parents had seen the video. One mother called Rhett directly. I can't have my son training in a place the internet is calling a crack house. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. I know you mean well, but I can't. Rhett said he understood. He hung up. He stood alone in the back room of the community center, looking at the mats where 12 kids used to stand. 9 remained, days until demolition. Silas, meanwhile, had a meeting with 2 city council members at Iron Forge. He gave them a tour, showed them the cage, showed them the revenue projections for franchise location number 2, showed them an architect's rendering of what Eastside would look like once the community center was gone. Glass walls, black mats, a lobby with his face on a 20-foot banner. This neighborhood needs investment, Silas told them. Not charity, not some old man babysitting kids in a condemned building. Investment. Both council members nodded. One of them was already on Silas's payroll. The other would be soon. Rhett didn't know about the meeting. He didn't know about the payroll. All he knew is that every morning the mats at Iron Forge were a little harder to clean, and every evening the mats at Eastside had a little more empty space. He was losing on both fronts, and he was running out of time. One night, 9 kids on the mats. The ceiling dripped in the corner where the tarp had shifted. Rhett stood at the front of the room, hands behind his back, watching them work through a footwork drill he'd stolen from Silas's evening class. Cade finished first. He always did. He walked over to Rhett and spoke low enough that the others couldn't hear. Georgia Regionals are in a few weeks. 3 of us qualified last year. We can do it again. Rhett didn't answer right away. He looked at the 9 kids still moving on the mats, then at the demolition notice taped to the window. If we win, Cade said, people will see what this place really is. Not a crack house, a gym, a real one. Rhett knew what the boy was asking. Not just permission to compete, permission to fight back. Not with fists, with proof. 3 trophies on a shelf meant nothing to the city council, but 3 trophies on the news. 3 black kids from Eastside trained by a janitor beating gym kids with $1,000 coaches. That was a different story. Rhett looked at Cade. Double session starting tomorrow, 6 days a week. No excuses, no missed rounds. Cade grinned. It was the first time anyone at Eastside had smiled in weeks. Yes, sir. Rhett turned back to the room. Again from the top, faster. 3 weeks later, Silas hosted the Iron Forge grand opening. Not a grand opening in the traditional sense. The gym had been open for years, but Silas had rebranded. New logo, new cage, new lighting rig with LED panels that pulsed red and blue like a UFC event. He'd invited 2 investors from Miami, a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and 3 local TV cameras. The live stream was running on his YouTube channel from the moment the doors opened. 400 people packed the main floor. Students, fans, influencers. Silas had flown people in to film content. The energy was loud and electric and exactly the way Silas wanted it. He had a full card planned. 3 exhibition matches between his top students, a grappling demo, a Q&A with a retired UFC fighter he'd paid $10,000 to show up and shake hands. But Silas needed a finale, something the internet hadn't seen before, something that would push him past 3 million followers by morning. He needed Rhett. Rhett was in the back hallway mopping the locker room floor. He heard the crowd but didn't look up. Grand opening meant nothing to him except more mess to clean tomorrow. Then Silas appeared in the doorway. 2 students flanked him like bodyguards. The hallway camera was already rolling. Mop man, you're up. I'm not on the schedule, sir. You are now. Silas grinned. I promised these people a show, and I've got one more demonstration. A real one. Live in the cage. Rhett shook his head. I don't fight. You don't have to fight. You just have to stand there. Silas stepped closer. His voice dropped low enough that the camera wouldn't catch it. You walk out there or you're fired tonight. No notice. No final check. Choose. Rhett looked at the mop in his hand, thought about the tape he needed to buy, thought about the 9 kids waiting for him at East Side, thought about the days left on the demolition clock. He set the mop against the wall. Silas grabbed the back of Rhett's collar and walked him down the hallway toward the main floor. The crowd saw them coming. Someone started chanting, "Mop man, mop man, mop man!" It caught on fast. 400 voices. The sound bounced off the concrete walls. Silas opened the cage door and shoved Rhett through it. Rhett stumbled forward, caught his balance, and stood still. The lights hit him full in the face. He squinted. He hadn't been inside the cage since he'd cleaned it that morning. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas grabbed a microphone from the cage side table. "You all know Mop Man, my most loyal employee, 61 years old, never missed a day. And tonight he volunteered to help me show you something." Rhett had not volunteered. "I'm going to demonstrate what happens when a trained fighter faces a regular person. No tricks, no scripts, just reality." The crowd roared. Phones went up like a wall of glass. The live stream viewer count climbed past 40,000. Silas tossed a pair of gloves at Rhett's feet. Rhett didn't pick them up. "Put them on, old man. I don't want to hurt you too bad." Rhett didn't move. Silas shrugged. "Suit yourself." He raised his fists and bounced on his toes, circling Rhett like a predator. The crowd clapped in rhythm. Cade was in the 4th row. He'd come to watch the exhibition matches. He didn't know this was coming. He stood up. His fists were clenched at his sides. The girl next to him grabbed his arm. "Don't." Rhett saw Cade from the corner of his eye. He gave a single, almost invisible shake of his head. "Sit down." Cade sat. Silas threw his first punch, a jab aimed at Rhett's chin. Fast, clean, textbook. Rhett moved his head 2 inches to the left. The fist sailed past his ear. His feet didn't shift. His hands stayed at his sides. The crowd went quiet for half a second, then louder. Silas frowned. He threw a right cross, harder, faster, aimed at the temple. Rhett slipped it, rolled his shoulder, let the punch pass over, and pivoted on his back foot with a smoothness that did not belong to a 61-year-old janitor. His weight transferred like water. No wasted motion, no panic. Silas's eyes changed. Something behind them recalculated. He threw a 3-punch combination, jab, cross, hook, the combination he taught in his advanced class every week. The combination Rhett had watched from behind his mop 100 times. Rhett slipped the jab, parried the cross. And when the hook came, he ducked under it and stepped to Silas's outside angle, a move that put him in the one position Silas's entire system couldn't account for. Silas was open, completely, his left side exposed, his chin up, his weight on the wrong foot. Rhett's right hand came up from his hip. Not a wild swing, not a haymaker, a short, compact counter right. The kind of punch that doesn't look like much on camera, but carries 30 years of muscle memory behind it. It landed flush on Silas's jaw, clean, precise, final. 225 pounds of sculpted muscle dropped straight down. Silas's knees buckled first, then his torso folded, then his face hit the mat. He did not get up. Silence. 400 people, tens of thousands of live stream viewers, not a single sound for 3 full seconds. Then the gym exploded, screaming, shouting. The cage fence rattled as people grabbed it and shook. Cade was on his feet with both hands on his head, mouth open, no words coming out. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter had her phone in one hand and her press badge in the other, trying to push closer to the cage. Rhett stood over Silas. His right hand dropped back to his side. His breathing hadn't changed. His expression hadn't changed. He looked at Silas on the mat the same way he looked at a dirty floor, something that just needed to be dealt with. He stepped over Silas's body, walked to the cage door, opened it, and left. The video hit the internet before Rhett reached the parking lot. By midnight, it had millions of views. By morning, even more. The headline wrote itself. 61-year-old janitor one-punches MMA trainer at his own grand opening. The clip played on ESPN, WorldStar, CNN, and every combat sports podcast in the country. Slow-motion breakdowns appeared within hours. Former boxers analyzed Rhett's counter right on YouTube. "That's not an amateur punch," one said. "That's a fighter's punch. That old man has thrown that exact shot 10,000 times." The internet had a new name for Rhett Hale. They called him One Punch. Silas woke up on the mat with a paramedic shining a light in his eyes. His jaw was swollen. His right ear was ringing. 2 of his students helped him to his feet. The crowd had thinned, but the cameras were still rolling. He didn't say a word until he got to the locker room. Then he called his lawyer. By the end of the week, Rhett Hale had been served with a civil lawsuit, assault and battery, Silas Crow versus Rhett Hale, filed in Fulton County Superior Court. Damages sought, $450,000. The complaint described Rhett as an unprovoked aggressor who attacked his employer during a live public event, causing severe physical injury and emotional distress. Silas gave his first interview to a local news station that afternoon. He wore a neck brace he didn't need and a bandage across his jaw that covered nothing. He sat in a leather chair in his office at Iron Forge, surrounded by his trophies and magazine covers. "I trusted this man," Silas said, staring into the camera. "I gave him a job when nobody else would. I treated him like family, and he attacked me in my own gym, in front of my students, in front of children." He paused, wiped his eye with the back of his hand. "I'm not just filing this lawsuit for me. I'm filing it for every business owner who's ever been assaulted by an employee, for every trainer who's ever tried to help someone and gotten hurt for it. This man is dangerous, and he needs to be held accountable." The interview aired that evening and again later. By the next morning, it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. Silas's version of the story was clean, simple, and camera-ready. Employer gives janitor a chance. Janitor attacks employer on live TV. Employer seeks justice. Nobody mentioned that Silas had dragged Rhett into the cage by his collar. Nobody mentioned the threat. Nobody mentioned that Rhett had never agreed to fight. The narrative was set, and it was working. Rhett was fired the same day the lawsuit was filed. No severance, no final paycheck. Silas's assistant sent a text message. "Your services are no longer needed. Please return your uniform and key by end of day." Rhett returned both. He walked home 3 miles, the same route he'd been walking since Silas cut his hours, except now there was no job at the end of it. He had $612 in his checking account. Rent was due soon. The kids at East Side needed new wraps. The demolition clock was ticking. He sat in his truck outside the community center that night and did the math. There was no version of the numbers that worked. Not without a job. Not with a lawsuit hanging over him. Not with a lawyer he couldn't afford. Cade found him there later, still sitting, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. "Mr. Hale, you coming in?" "Give me a minute." Cade didn't give him a minute. He opened the passenger door and sat down. "I saw the news. It's all lies. Everybody who was there knows it's lies. Knowing and proving are 2 different things." "Then we prove it." Cade pulled out his phone. "I've been talking to the other kids. We've got an idea." The idea was simple, and it changed everything. That night, Cade and 4 other students from Eastside Community Center posted videos on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Not reaction videos, not rants, training videos, months of footage they had filmed on their phones during Rhett's classes. Rhett drilling footwork with a 14-year-old named Jalen, who'd never thrown a punch before walking into Eastside. Rhett teaching a 16-year-old named Leora how to slip a jab and counter. Rhett wrapping Cade's hands before his first tournament fight, talking him through breathing exercises in a voice so calm it sounded like a lullaby. And then the tournament footage. 3 kids from East Side, Jalen, Leora, and Cade, standing on podiums at the Georgia Regional Youth Combat Tournament. Gold medals around their necks. Rhett in the background, arms crossed, not smiling, but nodding. The way a man nods when his work speaks for itself. Cade captioned his video, "They're calling him dangerous. This is the man who taught me how to defend myself without anger. This is the man who taught us discipline when nobody else showed up. His name is Rhett Hale. He's not a criminal. He's our coach. #OnePunchCoach. #Justice for Rhett." The video hit 1 million views in 12 hours. Then the comments started shifting. People went back and watched the original grand opening footage frame by frame. They saw Silas grab Rhett's collar. They saw Rhett shake his head. They saw Silas shove him through the cage door. They saw Rhett stand still with his hands at his sides while Silas threw the first punch. The internet turned. That old man didn't attack anyone. He defended himself. Silas threw first. It's right there in the video. How is this even a lawsuit? Wait, this janitor trained 3 regional champions in a community center for free. Sports journalists picked up the thread. A former ESPN analyst posted a breakdown of the fight footage alongside the training videos. His conclusion was one sentence. Rhett Hale is not a janitor who got lucky. He's a trained fighter who showed extraordinary restraint. A GoFundMe appeared, not started by Rhett, started by Jalen's mother. The goal was $20,000 to cover Rhett's legal fees. It hit $20,000 in 4 hours, $50,000 by the next morning. By the end of the week, it had crossed $180,000. Rhett had a lawyer now, a real one, a civil rights attorney named Tessa Vale who'd seen the videos and called Cade directly. "I'm not doing this for the money," she told Rhett on their first call. "I'm doing this because I watched a man get dragged into a cage on camera and then get sued for surviving it. That's not justice. That's a performance, and I don't let performances win in my courtroom." Silas saw the GoFundMe numbers. He saw the comment sections flipping. He saw his follower count drop from 3 million to 2.4 in a week. For the first time since he'd opened Iron Forge, Silas Crow was not controlling the narrative, and the courtroom hadn't even opened yet. The hearing was scheduled for a morning in Fulton County, Superior Court, Courtroom 4B, Judge Harlan Porter presiding. The gallery was full before the doors opened. Local press, national press, a camera crew from ESPN that had been following the story since the fight footage went viral. Cade sat in the second row with 6 students from East Side. They wore matching black shirts. The shirts said nothing. They didn't need to. Silas arrived in a charcoal suit with his attorney, a high-profile litigator named Quincy Vale who charged $800 an hour and had never lost a civil assault case. Silas looked polished, calm, confident. He nodded at the cameras like a man who'd already won. Rhett arrived in the only suit he owned, a dark navy jacket from a thrift store on Moreland Avenue. The sleeves were slightly too long. He sat next to Tessa Vale, opened a bottle of water, and said nothing. Quincy went first. His argument was surgical. Rhett Hale, an employee of Iron Forge MMA, had been invited to participate in a voluntary demonstration. Without warning or provocation, he struck the plaintiff with a closed fist, causing a fractured jaw, severe concussion, and lasting emotional trauma. The defendant showed no remorse. The act was deliberate, violent, and criminal. "This was not self-defense," Quincy said. "This was an ambush disguised as a demonstration. Mr. Crow nearly died in that cage." He paused for effect. The gallery was still. Then Tessa Vale stood up. She didn't start with an argument. She started with a remote control. She pointed it at the courtroom screen and pressed play. The footage was from Iron Forge's own security system, hallway camera, time-stamped the night of the grand opening. It showed Silas walking into the back hallway with 2 students. It showed him standing over Rhett. It showed Rhett shaking his head. It showed Silas leaning in close. The moment his voice dropped, the moment the camera couldn't capture audio, but the body language said everything. Then it showed Silas grabbing the back of Rhett's collar and dragging him down the hallway. Tessa paused the video on that frame, Rhett's feet skidding on the floor, Silas's fist wrapped in the fabric of his uniform. She let the image sit on the screen for 10 seconds before she spoke. "Voluntary participation," she said. "That's what opposing counsel called it." She pressed play again. The cage footage, the live stream angle, Silas shoving Rhett through the cage door, Rhett standing still, hands at his sides, Silas throwing the first punch, then the second, then the third. "Mr. Hale did not throw a punch until he had been struck at 3 times, Tessa said. "He responded with a single defensive blow after being physically forced into a locked cage by his employer. That is not an ambush. That is survival." Quincy objected. The judge overruled. Tessa called her first witness, a former Iron Forge student named Grant Bailey, 26. He trained with Silas for 2 years before quitting. He testified that Silas regularly used physical intimidation on students, slapping headgear during drills, throwing equipment, screaming in faces from inches away. When students complained, Silas threatened to post videos of their worst sparring moments on his channel. Second witness, another former student. Same story. Third witness, same. Fourth witness, a woman named Danielle Cross, 23, who testified that Silas had shoved her into the cage fence during a disagreement about her membership fee. She'd filed a police report. It went nowhere. 4 witnesses, 4 patterns. The gallery shifted. Reporters typed faster. Then Tessa pulled the financial records. Rhett's pay stubs from Iron Forge. 26 months of employment. Tessa displayed them side by side on the screen. The first 12 months showed 40 hours per week at $14 an hour. The next 14 months showed a gradual reduction. 38 hours, 35, 32, then 28. Same workload documented on the cleaning schedule. Fewer hours on the paycheck. Mr. Crow reduced Mr. Hale's paid hours by 30% while maintaining the same workload, Tessa said. Under Georgia labor law, that constitutes wage theft, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because Mr. Crow knew that Mr. Hale couldn't afford to quit. Silas's jaw tightened. Quincy whispered something in his ear. Silas shook his head. Tessa wasn't finished. Your Honor, during our preparation for this case, we uncovered additional documents that we believe are relevant to the plaintiff's character and motive. She pulled up a series of emails sent from Silas Crow's personal Gmail account to 2 members of the Atlanta City Council, Alderman Rick Sutter and Councilwoman Diane Payton. The emails detailed a proposal for Iron Forge franchise location number 2 to be built on the site of the Eastside Community Center. Attached to one email was a wire transfer confirmation, $15,000 to a consulting firm registered to Sutter's brother-in-law. Another transfer, $10,000 to a PAC that had donated exclusively to Payton's re-election campaign. These payments were made within 60 days of the council's vote to approve the rezoning and demolition of Eastside Community Center, Tessa said. The same community center where Mr. Hale volunteers 6 nights a week teaching self-defense to at-risk youth. The same building Mr. Crow intends to demolish to expand his business. The courtroom was silent. Not dramatic silence. Real silence. The kind where everyone in the room is recalculating everything they thought they knew. Silas stood up. Quincy grabbed his arm. Silas pulled away. This is ridiculous. His voice cracked. I built that gym from nothing. I created jobs. I created content. I gave that old man a paycheck when he had nothing. And this is what I get? Some washed-up janitor swings at me, and suddenly I'm the criminal. Judge Porter looked at Silas over his glasses. Mr. Crow, sit down. No, I'm not sitting down. You want to know who Rhett Hale is? He's a 61-year-old nobody who mopped my floors for 2 years and couldn't even do that right. He's not a coach. He's not a fighter. He's a janitor. That's all he is. That's all he'll ever be. The courtroom heard every word. The cameras caught every second. Cade sat in the second row, arms crossed, watching Silas tear himself apart on live television. Judge Porter waited until Silas finished. Then he spoke. Mr. Crow, I have reviewed the footage, the witness testimony, the financial records, and the correspondence presented today. The plaintiff's claim of unprovoked assault is directly contradicted by video evidence showing the plaintiff physically compelling the defendant into a locked enclosure and initiating physical contact. The motion to dismiss is granted. Additionally, I am referring the wage theft evidence and the financial correspondence to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for criminal review. He set his gavel down softly. He didn't need to bang it. This court is adjourned. The Fulton County District Attorney opened a formal investigation into Silas Crow within 48 hours of the hearing. The evidence Tessa Vale had presented in civil court became the foundation of a criminal case. Wire transfers, emails, a paper trail that Silas had never bothered to hide because he never imagined anyone would look. Alderman Rick Sutter resigned before the end of the week. He issued a 2-sentence statement through his attorney and refused all interviews. Councilwoman Diane Payton held out longer. She denied everything for 3 days. Then the consulting firm invoices surfaced. Payments routed through her brother-in-law's company that matched the exact dates of the rezoning votes. She resigned on a Friday afternoon, quietly, while the news cycle was focused on a hurricane in Florida. Silas was charged with 2 counts of bribery of a public official, 1 count of wage theft, and 1 count of filing a fraudulent civil complaint. His attorney, Quincy Vale, dropped him as a client the same week. The retainer had run out, and Quincy could read a room. Iron Forge MMA closed its doors on a Monday, not voluntarily. The city revoked Silas's business license pending the criminal proceedings. The LED lights went dark. The cage sat empty. The magazine covers stayed on the walls because nobody bothered to take them down. Silas's social media empire collapsed in parallel. Sponsors pulled out. Brand deals evaporated. His follower count, which had peaked at 3 million, fell below 800,000 in 2 weeks. The comments that remained were not kind. Alpha King became a punchline. Someone edited his grand opening footage into a meme, Silas talking into the microphone, then cutting to him flat on the mat. It played on loop, 14 million views. The rezoning order for East Side was reversed by the interim council within 10 days. The demolition was canceled. The building was placed on the city's historic community assets registry, which meant it could never be sold to a private developer without a public referendum. But the community center still had a leaking roof and cracked walls and a heavy bag held together with duct tape. That changed later. The GoFundMe that Jalen's mother had started for Rhett's legal fees had grown far beyond what any lawyer would charge. $180,000 sat in the account after Tessa's fees were paid. Rhett didn't keep it. He signed every dollar over to the East Side Community Center Renovation Fund. New mats, new heavy bags, a repaired roof, fresh paint, a regulation training ring donated by a boxing equipment company in Savannah that had seen the videos. A local contractor did the renovation work at cost. He said his son had been bullied in middle school. He said he wished someone like Rhett had been there. The city of Atlanta offered Rhett Hale the position of head coach for the newly created Atlanta Youth Self-Defense Initiative, a city-funded program, 12 community centers across Atlanta, salary, benefits, and a budget for equipment and staff. The mayor made the announcement at a press conference held inside East Side Community Center. Rhett stood in the back of the room while the mayor spoke. He didn't go to the podium. He didn't make a speech. Cade spoke instead, 19 years old, standing at a microphone in front of cameras from 6 news stations. "Everybody wants to talk about the punch," Cade said. "One punch, that's the clip. That's the headline. But that punch is the least important thing Mr. Hale ever did." He paused. "The important thing is the 600 nights he showed up to this room when nobody was watching. When there were no cameras, no followers, no GoFundMe, just him and us on these mats. That's what a real coach looks like. That's what a real man looks like." The room was quiet. Then it wasn't. Rhett stood in the back, arms crossed. He didn't clap. He didn't wave. He nodded once, the same nod he gave at the tournament when his kid stood on the podium. The nod that said the work spoke for itself. Outside, the demolition notice was gone. In its place, a new sign, hand-painted by Jalen. East Side Community Center, Coach Hale's gym. All are welcome. The paint was still wet. 6 months later, East Side Community Center didn't look like the same building. The roof didn't leak. The walls were clean. The basketball court had new rims. The back room, the room where Rhett had trained 12 kids on cracked mats with a duct-taped heavy bag, was now a full training facility. Padded floors, a regulation ring, 3 heavy bags that didn't split at the seams, a wall of mirrors so the kids could watch their own footwork. And there were more than 12 kids now, 38 every night, ages 14 to 19. Some came from East Side, some came from Bankhead, some came from College Park, riding 2 buses to get there. Word had traveled, not through TikTok, not through ESPN, through the only network that mattered in these neighborhoods. One kid telling another kid that there was a place on Boulevard where an old man would teach you how to stand up for yourself and never ask for $1. Rhett ran the evening session the same way he always had. Stance drill, footwork, slip and counter, breathing. He didn't yell, he didn't perform. He walked between the rows and adjusted a hand here, a foot there, a chin that was too high. The same quiet corrections he'd been making for years. The only difference was the shirt. The city had given him a polo with the Atlanta Youth Self-Defense Initiative logo on the chest. He wore it every day. It was the first uniform he'd ever been proud of. Cade was still there, not as a student anymore, as an assistant coach. He'd turned 20 and had started training the youngest group, the 14 and 15-year-olds who came in scared and left standing taller. He taught them the same way Rhett had taught him, patient, precise, no shortcuts. Jalen, the 14-year-old who'd never thrown a punch before walking into East Side, was now 16 and had won his second regional title. Leora had moved up a weight class and was training for the state championship. 3 more students had entered their first tournaments. 2 of them won. None of them had ever heard of Silas Crow, and none of them needed to. Silas pleaded guilty to 1 count of bribery and 1 count of wage theft in exchange for a reduced sentence. 18 months in a federal minimum security facility in Jessup, Georgia. His social media accounts were deleted. His franchise plans were dead. The name Iron Forge MMA returned 0 results on Google within a year. The internet moved on. It always does. The memes faded. The clips stopped trending. The hashtags went quiet. But every night at 6, the lights came on at Eastside Community Center, and every night, Rhett Hale was there. One evening after class, Cade found Rhett sitting alone in the training room. The kids had gone home. The mats were clean. The lights were still on. "You good, Mr. Hale?" Rhett looked at the room, at the mirrors, at the bags, at the sign Jalen had painted, now framed and mounted by the door. "You know what the hardest punch I ever threw was?" Cade leaned against the wall. "The one in the cage?" Rhett shook his head. "No, that was the easiest punch I ever threw. Muscle memory. Didn't even think about it." He paused. "The hardest punch was every morning I walked into that gym and didn't swing. Every time he threw that mop, every time he filmed me, every time he called me nothing, keeping these hands down. That was the fight." Cade didn't say anything for a while. Then he nodded. "Same time tomorrow." Rhett stood up, turned off the lights, locked the door behind them. "Same time tomorrow." If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know what you were carrying inside? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because every week, we find the people the world overlooked, and we let them speak. Yo, the hardest punch is the one you don't throw. For real. Anyone can swing back. Real power is knowing you could end somebody and choosing not to every day. Restraint ain't weakness. It's the most disciplined thing you'll ever do.